Hi, my name is Kate Maroney. I'm a professional mezzo-soprano and I teach a voice pedagogy class at Manus in New York City. I also reside here in Brooklyn with my two cats, Misha and Eiler. And I'm here to talk, hopefully succinctly, about breathing for singing and breathing for singers as it may pertain to or induce or aggravate symptoms of reflux. So this week in my voice pedagogy class, we were talking about the respiratory system and managing breath for singing. And that correlated with a visit I made to my gastroenterologist. I've developed issues with reflux in my early 30s, and I never really had them before, but I've been dealing with that recently. So I went to my doctor and I said, is it possible that there's any correlation between singing and between reflux? And my doctor said, yes, there's definitely a correlation, and that she sees a lot of opera singers who have symptoms of reflux, who have issues with their lower esophageal sphincter and develop hiatal hernias, which is a protrusion of the stomach area through the esophagus. And she showed me an exercise that is a breathing cool down, a lower diaphragmatic breathing release exercise, and she suggested that I practice it every day, and that perhaps it may help to ameliorate some of my symptoms. And I hope that this maybe is helpful for some of you who are singers who deal with this. I also just want to say I'm not a medical doctor, and I know a lot about singing because I sing all the time, but I'm very much exploring myself. And I've looked, there's a little bit of information out there on breathing for reflux, but there's not a ton. So hopefully maybe this will lead, or the medical community and the singing community can look more into this and come up with some physical exercises or cool downs that we can do as singers to help abate some of our reflux symptoms. So first, I want to give a brief overview of breathing for singing. And what happens when we take in breath as singers, actually as all living things, we have a diaphragm, which is a very large muscle. It's the second largest muscle in our body. It is shaped like an upside down salad bowl at rest. It's unbalanced. It's sort of two domes. The right dome is a little bit higher, but most important is that at rest, it's like this upside down salad bowl. It's huge. It bisects your entire body. It separates your lower abdominal area from your upper thoracic cavity, which is your rib cage that contain your lungs and your heart. So the diaphragm at rest connects to your sternum, and it also connects to your lower ribs. And when you take in breath, the diaphragm contracts. When this huge muscle contracts, it flattens. And as it flattens, what we go for is a release of the lower abdominal area and the abdominal viscera, the muscles that are in this region. We want them to release. The more we can get that lower abdominal release, the more the diaphragm can contract. And as it flattens and contracts, it's creating space in our thoracic cavity. And that's helpful for singing because the more space that we can create, the more expansion we can create, the more easily breath is able to come in. So what happens when the diaphragm contracts, our lower abdominal area is able to release, our rib cage expansion happens because we have intercostal muscles in between each of our ribs, and the external intercostal muscles connect from the upper rib to the lower rib, and they contract too, and they pull the lower ribs up, and they create kind of an up and out bucket handle expansion in our rib cage that we call the gesture of inhalation. This gesture of inhalation is something that all living things do. But normally, if you're a non-singer, you take a breath and you feel this expansion, and then as you're talking, you feel a collapse. Or as you sing, you would feel a collapse. And we would do that naturally because the diaphragm is very, very strong and it's flat and it wants to release. And your rib cage wants to release and collapse and release. When we sing, we do all of these exercises to actively resist that collapse. So we provide a stable supply of air for our singing and to create vibration at our vocal fold. We also want to create a steady and energized feeling of buoyant support that sustains our phrases, and we don't ever want that collapse to happen. So we do all sorts of exercises where we breathe, or silent breath really, and we maybe go out on S, but as we go out on S, we actually want to feel as though our ribcage is continuing that outward and upward expansion and not just deflating like a balloon would deflate when all the air goes out of it. That's what we resist. That's what singers train for years and for decades to do, and that's something that I think has a correlation with why singers develop reflux. So when you think about it, if we're putting pressure on our diaphragmatic area because we're breathing, remember it's this upside down salivable at rest, we're breathing, this huge muscle contracts, the abdominal area is distended, our rib cage is expanded, and air just, is forced to come in. We never have to gasp for air or pull air in. It comes in to maintain that dynamic equilibrium. So our rib cage is expanded. What happens is the same pressure, the same idea that perhaps draws air into our thoracic cavity, and that idea that we want to maintain that gesture of inhalation, that pressure is also created as our abdominal area, wants to release back in and upward. So when you think about it, contents of our stomach acid, might actually be pushing against our diaphragmatic area. Here's why. When we swallow, food travels through our esophagus, which lies right behind our trachea or our windpipe, and we swallow, food goes through our esophagus. Remember, this diaphragm is a gigantic muscle that bisects our thoracic cavity from our lower abdominal area. So food has to go through the esophagus. The esophagus has to travel through the diaphragm, and that happens at the lower esophageal sphincter, and that is what, in so many cases of reflux, becomes weakened. That sphincter, which is like a valve that should be able to seal itself off and keep food and keep stomach acid from traveling back upward through the esophagus, that sphincter becomes weakened, and as it becomes weakened, more reflux, more acid is able to come up, and it can come all the way up to the laryngeal area. And when we sing and our diaphragm is contracted and flattened, it makes sense that we're trying to maintain that contraction and that expanded ribcage area as we sing. There's some pressure pushing up from the stomach and from the abdominal area up on underneath the diaphragm and up, towards the esophagus, so that lower esophageal sphincter, there's pressure being put on it. It makes sense that food and stomach acid and in some cases, in cases of hiatal hernia, that the stomach might actually pressurize or push through and up to protrude through that area, weaken the sphincter. This is what I deal with. So here's what my doctor said, which I hope might be helpful or worth exploring for you. Every day when I sing, for hours, when I practice, when I rehearse, and I am thinking about breathing, and I'm thinking about maintaining this gesture of inhalation in my thoracic area, and this low diaphragmatic release and low abdominal release, that's great. So that's what I'm working on when I'm singing. But when I'm all done with that, in order to kind of cool down, lower, relax, and release my abdominal area and relax the diaphragm area and all of the muscles that are working, what I do is put a hand on my chest and a hand on my lower abdominal area. And I take breath, and I feel that low abdominal release, which tells me, my diaphragm is contracting and flattening, and I feel this release. Unlike what I do when I sing, I actively resist the gesture of inhalation feeling. I don't want to feel that my rib cage is expanding. I want to just let it be completely collapsed, actually. I want to feel that it's completely inactive. So I'm going to take in breath and really keep a hand here to make sure there's no movement. I could also keep a hand here and kind of, I can actually feel my ribs working against it because I'm so used to doing that, but really kind of just keep my whole rib cage and chest area very calm as I try to take some really low relaxed breaths. Now what this does, maybe with the help of gravity, is like, you know, help counter any type of pressurized and upward stress that singing and breathing for singing is putting on my system, just to kind of cool down and lower that mechanism. So I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it for 5 minutes every day at the end of the day after I've sung. You can do it on the subway, you could do it as you drive, you could do it you know, just for a few minutes before you go to bed. I'm gonna try it. Maybe it will help. I don't know that it's a cure-all. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it every day and see if it helps, you know, with other things I do with regard to diet and lifestyle. I'm just gonna try it and see. I don't think it can hurt. I like to think of it as like a cool down stretch after I run, go to the gym, or, you know, bike or something. You know, just want to stretch out your muscles, keep things flexible. So I will try it. Like I said, I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not an expert in the field. I just thought this was really interesting and worth more thought. And I hope some of you find it helpful, worth exploring, worth practicing. And thank you for listening.